Please. Oh my god!
Imagine
Okay,
how
we're
a
fine.
woman feels. Imagine how soft and warm her skin feels. Imagine the sweet smell of her perfume. Imagine her tenderly pressing her soft lips against yours. Imagine her letting you get on top of her and insert your inside her, softly moaning as it slides in. Imagine the walls of her tight, soft, warm wrapped around every inch of your. Imagine her breathing getting heavier with every thrust. Imagine her wrapping her arms and legs around you, holding you as close as she possibly can, and begging you to inside her as you release every ounce of your into her. Then imagine the feeling of pure satisfaction and peace that comes afterwards, and looking beside you to see a person
What the
that
fuck is
cares.
this?
Moment of internet history. There's something basically Soviet about the way the internet names things. Stalin had portmanteaus like Agitprop, Politburo, and Kompromat, and we have webinar, podcast, and Incel, short for involuntary celibate. The word Incel was invented in the late 90s by a lonely bisexual called Alana, who created a website called Alana's Involuntary Celibacy Project that was essentially a safe space for people who just couldn't get it in. But in our own miserable moment of internet history, the word incel refers to a more specific community of mostly heterosexual men, centered around forums like incel.me and r/braincells. This group has recently gotten a lot of bad press because for the last few years they've been churning out mass murderers faster than Marvel can make Avengers movies. But most incels aren't violent killers, they're just men who've formed an identity around not getting laid. In this video, I don't want to mock incels or lecture them or even sympathize with them. I just want to understand who they are and why they're like this. To start with, sometimes the best way to understand a person's world is to learn their language. And the language of the incels, well, you'll see. First base, incelese. Does it ever bother you that the word women makes adult females sound just a little bit too human? Well, incels have a solution to that. They've taken to calling women femoids. The choice of vocabulary tells us how incels think of women, not as sisters or mothers, and certainly not as autonomous people, but as a kind of foreign, inscrutable object, comparable to a natural resource, unobtainium, to which incels believe all men are entitled, and to which they feel they have been unjustly denied. There's a long tradition of nerdy men talking about women in nerdily misogynistic ways. I'm reminded of famed rocket scientist Werner von Braun's remark about female astronauts.
We are reserving 110 pounds of payload for recreational equipment.
Which is not to say that alpha males are less misogynistic than nerds, but simply that nerds have a nerdy style of misogyny. Now, femoid is about as neutral a term as incels have for women, and it's only downhill from there. There's the usual standbys, bitches, sluts, whores, all conveying a searing resentment of female sexuality, the pinnacle of which is represented by the bespoke incel coinage roasty, which I'm sorry to inform you refers to the incel belief that the human vulva become mutilated through repeated penetration by different men, though not through repeated penetration by the same man, interestingly, and thereby come to resemble roast beef. Now, by definition, incels haven't actually observed any vaginas, but to incels, anatomy is more a matter of metaphysical speculation than crude science. Though if you ask me, the right metaphor for a veteran vag is not roast beef, but sour grapes. Of course, not all femoids are created equal. There are various subspecies.
The Becky or normie femoid is to be contrasted with the Stacy, or sexually desirable femoid, whose distinguishing features include makeup on point, never works a day in her life, naturally curvy body gives men instant erections, big tits and ass show fertility.
Leave my buns alone, you savages! The Stacy, naturally, has a male counterpart, whom incels call the Chad.
A Chad is a hunky alpha whose hands are always prepared to grab nearby fertile pussy. He has never heard a song in his entire life. He has a sloped forehead with a strong brow, ram bow chin, strong jawline, flat occipital plate.
It must needs be remarked that the skull of the Chad exhibiteth a brow ridge most pronounced, whereas the skull of the Virgin is most inadequate in this regard, predisposing such specimens to an abject existence of lamentation and cuckoldry. It's time to talk about bone structure. According to a classic incel meme,
the difference between Chad and
How about
non-Chad
switching your Western citizenship with my fucking Chinese citizenship?
Advice: kill every communist anytime you see 1 minus 10, I guess.
millimeters of bone.
I would like to propose a sociological theory, Foppington's Law. Once bigotry or self-loathing permeate a given community, it is only a matter of time before deep metaphysical significance is assigned to the shape of human skulls. Why skulls, you ask? Well, the best explanation I can come up with is that a skull is inanimate and unchangeable. It's therefore the perfect symbol of the intrinsic and permanent characteristics that bigots like to assign to certain groups of people. If you believe, for example, that a certain race or gender is intellectually inferior, you can justify your belief by pointing to the shape of a skull and saying, well, that's the reason why. It's just nature. There's nothing that can be done about it. And that is exactly the way incels think about love and celibacy. Mankind is divided into two groups of people, the Chads with the fuckable skulls, and the incels whose bones come up a few millimeters short. Corn dog? Anyone? I'm really hungry. Of course, it's not just the skulls the incels blame for their sexlessness. They have a whole dictionary of jargon explaining the causes of involuntary celibacy. Height cells are incel due to their inferior stature, whereas mental cells can't attract women because of mental illness or autism, or they're addicts and then called drug cells. Wrist cells, on the other hand, are doomed by their overly delicate wrists. Now, obsessing about your wrist size does seem a little weird.
Oh yeah? Is it a little weird that the average dildo has more girth than my wrist? Is it weird at all that some men have thicker dicks than my wrist? But yeah, obviously, obsessing about my tiny wrists that are smaller than even many women's is completely irrational body dysmorphia, and the reason why no woman wants to be with me or even talk to me is my shitty personality, even though literal 80 IQ men who have nothing to talk about except who won the game last night are still able to attract a loving partner.
What the fuck?
Interesting. A significant number of incels are
Tiny
not white,
wrist.
in which case their unfuckability is attributed to race, and they are accordingly termed, apologies in advance, black cells, rice cells, curry cells, and so on. Which is not to say that all non-white men are celibate. There are, of course, the occasional Chads of color, with their superior skulls and towering stature, whom the incels have christened Tyrones, Changs, and Chad Preets. I'm so sorry. So you can be incel because of your looks, your height, your mind, or your race, but what unites them all is the conviction that love and sex are forever out of reach. Unless, of course, you delusionally imagine that you can ascend, that is, escape your inceldom. If you falsely and pathetically believe that there is any possibility of improvement, well, that makes you the lowest of the low, a sad and sorry hope cell. Second base, the red pill. So we have the building blocks of the incel worldview: the Stacys, the Chads, the incels, and the normies. From these elements, incels have constructed a theory of human nature and sexuality, which they call the red pill. Incels share the red pill worldview with the rest of the manosphere, that is, pickup artists, men's rights activists, and the voluntary celibate community known as men going their own way, abbreviated MGTOW. According to red pill theory, women are by nature hypergamous. Hypergamy, New Greek for marrying above, refers to the practice of seeking relationships with men above one's social status, and also, in incel usage, above one's attractiveness. According to incels, physical attractiveness is naturally distributed equally between the sexes. So, if you were to assign numerical ratings to attractiveness, as incels like to do, there would be about as many, say, 8 out of 10 women as 8 out of 10 men. Incels believe that in a just world, a 5 out of 10 man would naturally wind up in a relationship with his looks match, that is, a 5 out of 10 woman, equivalently attractive to himself. But sadly, this just system has been ruined by hypergamous women, who, regardless of their own attractiveness, are only interested in dating Chad. Incels sometimes...
I'm pretty sure it goes the other way around. At least as much, honestly, until your expectations get lowered enough. I'm pretty sure.
Call this the 80-20 rule, the idea that only the top 20% of men will ever be desired by women. Now, since most heterosexual men do end up in relationships with women, you might be raising your eyebrow at that idea. But incels have an explanation. According to the red pill theory, women often pursue a mating strategy called alpha fucks, beta bucks. This means that in her 20s, a woman will, as incels say, ride the cock carousel, sleeping with as many chads as possible. But as she ages into her 30s, she will settle down with a beta normie whom she's not really attracted to, but whom she will use for financial support, all the while continuously cuckolding him on the alpha cock carousel before inevitably abandoning him, taking him for everything he's worth in a divorce settlement, and running off to the Mediterranean with all the children and a new chad boyfriend, while the beta cock is left behind to fester in alimony payments, solitude, and poverty. So the upshot of the red pill theory is that for men, there are 3 possible outcomes. Either you're an incel, doomed to a lifetime of excruciating loneliness and resentment, or you're a normie, destined to wind up in a sexless marriage with an unfaithful wife who will divorce you, win custody of the children, and run off with all your money. Or you could be an alpha, an independent, promiscuous man who sleeps with lots of women and forms attachments to none of them. In the red pill philosophy, there are 2 ways to become alpha. The first is simply to be a chad by nature. The second is to become a pickup artist. Red-pilled pickup artists believe basically the same things about women that incels believe, that they are hypergamous, duplicitous, and fuckable, but not lovable. The difference is that pickup artists are not celibate. In fact, they try to have sex with as many women as possible by following a series of strategies and scripts known as game, as described by the book of that title, as well as by the red-pilled pickup artist Rouge V, author of a book called Bang! A new mascara from Benefit. So the tube is bomb, I am living. Let's see what the...
Alright, it's 35 fucking minutes of incel lingo. Oh, fucking good, dude.
This is